Good afternoon. Welcome again to another Family Caregiver Talk. Again, my name is Donna Mitchell with Aging Advantage. And Aging Advantage is a nonprofit organization that supports seniors and disabled adults in the greater St. Louis area. Through local grants and donations, we are able to provide these educational talks to our clients and their caregivers. So today we're going to be having Lynn Potts on, and she will share a little bit about On Track Advisors. So I want to welcome Lynn Potts. There you go, Lynn. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Donna. Actually, instead of really sharing more about our company, On Track Advisors, I would like to talk more about planning and preparing. I've been serving on the St. Louis Gateway End of Life Coalition, which advocates for planning for your end of life wishers. I've been on that board for about 14 years, and I have a long background and history in the long-term or elder care space. And I had an experience about 7 years ago that really prompted me to talk about this subject. Let's look at this question. Are you prepared for when you no longer can be prepared? What does that mean? And this doesn't always mean just end of life care, or this isn't always for seniors or elders. This topic could apply to any of us at any age. Well, those over 18. So let's talk about, what does this mean? Are you prepared for when you can no longer prepare? I want to talk about peace of mind planning. Why plan? What's in it for you? Or what's in it for others? I want to go over a checklist on how to better or easier, so to speak, go through a checklist and create your plan. Document that, share it with others. And then again, we'll wrap up with who benefits and why do you really want to have a plan? When I'm talking about planning, I'm talking about legal planning, financial planning, and planning for your healthcare or your end of life healthcare wishes being honored. I always ask people, do you have a plan? Nah, why do I need a plan? When I can't make my decisions, everybody else will do it for me. Or after I'm dead, who cares? Sometimes people have that attitude or that response. However, my question is, well, do you love your family? And when I say family, think of not just your biological family. Think of close friends, extended family/friends, or even professionals that you trust, maybe an attorney, financial planner, a clergy member. If you love those individuals, do you want to create more stress for them? Do you want to create a situation where they really don't know what your wishes are when you are no longer able to articulate those wishes? Do you want to put them in a lot of stress and anxiety? From personal experience, you don't. That's not a good thing that you want to do, because it not only creates stress for those individuals, it creates stress in their lives that affects their jobs, their relationships to others, maybe a spouse or children. It takes a lot of time away from their day-to-day normal life. Is that fair? So I say, if you love your family, do some planning. Don't make it so hard on them. And another reason for this is, do you want your end of life wishes to be honored? Maybe your loved ones are those who might be involved in your end of life care or managing your estate meaning your money, your assets after you die. Maybe they don't agree with how you want things done. If you have your wishes documented and you've communicated it with those individuals, they're going to have to honor your wishes, whether they like it or not, or you choose other individuals to carry out those wishes on your behalf. But it's important to get that information planned out, discussed with others, and in writing. And the last of why plan, do you want to have peace of mind to sleep at night, to know those things are being done and that you will not be putting a burden on others as you are then, or if you should become at a point where you're incapacitated physically or mentally, or even emotionally incapacitated to make decisions on your own behalf. So though I hope those are some compelling reasons as well why to plan. Next step is let's get to the planning. But I advocate if you plan, if you create, and I'll talk about this checklist in a minute, that planning ahead, it's essential in avoiding probate. Probate is when, if you don't know, if someone dies and their wishes are not properly documented, the right legal documentations are not in place, the assets will go into probate. So if mom thinks she's going to leave behind a sum of money, well, about half of that will be eaten up in court costs and legal fees. All that can be avoided. So that if mom thinks she's leaving X dollars to her children, that money will go to the children and not 50% of it already being eaten by the courts and attorney fees. So let's avoid probate. Let's also preserve family harmony. For a family that has maybe a large family or even a small family, maybe it's an individual that just has 2 children or a niece and a nephew or some loved ones that they want to either leave money behind or get involved in their end of life care. They're relying, you as an individual, relying on those people to help you at end of life. If those individuals that are helping you are not, again, in sync with your wishes, there could be a lot of fighting and arguing. And I know of a situation where mom died. There were 6 kids. By the time she was buried, and by the time she was buried and assets were discussed and lawyers had to get involved, et cetera, those 6 children absolutely hated each other. I don't think that's what parents want. So let's preserve family harmony by planning ahead. By also having documentation in place, it assists everybody in really knowing what you want. Where do you want to live at end of life? How do you want to be taken care of, kept alive or not kept alive? Where do you want to be buried? What does your funeral look like? What would you like if you're going to have a funeral? That assists your loved ones in carrying out your wishes and honoring those wishes, both in your health care and in the with your finances as well. So let's look at that big checklist and what I think, and we put together that would help individuals to avoid what I went through about 7 years ago, helping my uncle. So let me tell you a little story about my Uncle Emmett and the lessons that I learned. My uncle, smart man, not wealthy, not married, no children, and his only living relative was my mom. My mom lived in St. Louis. My uncle lived in Hawaii. He had been living there for about 40 years. Smart and independent, always was in control, probably why he wasn't married. But he really wanted, like I said, he was in control. He wanted things the way he wanted them. And he always got what he wanted because he didn't have to really worry about anyone else. Well, we got a phone call. My mom got a phone call from a social worker in the state of Hawaii saying, your brother's in really bad shape. Somebody needs to come here and take care of him, or he will become a ward of the state. We will have to take over his care and his finances and everything. Of course, my mom was distraught about that and called me and said, what are we going to do? I said, well, part of me said he didn't do a whole lot of planning, let him become a ward of the state. But I love my uncle and I have a close relationship with him. So I did not want that to happen. I said, okay, I'll see what I can do. And let's talk about the one thing he did right. About 3 years prior to this phone call, I convinced him to get a trust, to have an attorney draft a trust that spelled out his wishes, his end of life wishes, financial health care. I said, I don't care where you leave your money to. You just need to document who is going to be in charge or responsible legally to honor and carry those things out for you. So he did have a trust drafted. He did that right. I think what he did wrong or should have thought about was that, and the attorney should have also advised him on this, is, hey, if you're going to name your sister and you're both about the same age, what happens if your sister's incapacitated at the same time you might be incapacitated? Well, fortunately, we were able to have my mom resign as the trustee and power of attorney and assign those duties over to me. So again, I was able to jump in and start working with getting him in the proper housing that he needed, the proper health care that he needed, managing his money so that he did not run out of money and was able to pay for care as well as pay taxes, homeowner association fees, and all these bills that he had racked up. He had dementia. So he had let a lot of things go. And it caused a lot of stress for me. And on one hand, I learned a lot, which got me to this point in my career. It's helping me out tremendously now. However, muddling through things could have been so much easier had he just documented and communicated his wishes and what he wanted, and communicated the big checklist. And that's what we'll get to now. So I advise everybody, take a look at this checklist. Wow, it's big. It's a lot. Don't let it scare you. And it may not even be completely comprehensive. I created this list based on all the things I had to do for my uncle and all the documentation that would have been helpful to me prior to him getting dementia. But let's break this down into a little bit easier chunks. And hopefully most of you have and can check most of these boxes. But if not, let's take a look at them bit by bit. Number one, I say choose your trusted sources. In my uncle's case, his only two trusted sources were my mom and me. Now, he had friends. He'd lived in Hawaii for 40 years. He went to church and he had trusted individuals there, but they weren't family. And I think it was important to him to have family members really overseeing, which was a good thing because I knew him well enough to know what he would have wanted as far as his care. And that was the most important thing for me, is to have him have the right kind of care when he needed it the most. You do not need to name the same person as, say, your healthcare power of attorney or those to help navigate your decisions at that time as you do your financial. So you could have someone managing and overseeing and legally in charge of, say, your financial, and you could have somebody else overseeing healthcare. It does not have to be a family member, and you really can choose whoever you want. But who you do choose, make sure they know that and they agree to being your power of attorney or your representatives when you, again, are no longer able to make those decisions for yourself. Now, the big chunk of the list is the documentation. I'm going to look over my screen because I don't have this list memorized, but the documentation really is all of those things that you work with almost on a day-to-day basis, or they're things that you've done one time, like a marriage license, military documents, things that are done and put away somewhere, and you may not even be able to find them. I urge you to think about and look at this list, all the documents and all the information about you that maybe only you know, or maybe only one other person knows where that information is, where it's stored, access information. So let's go through this list and I'll talk about why some of these are important and how it affected me in caring for my uncle. Copy of the easy things, your driver's license, social security card, passport IDs. Make sure all of those things are in a safe place. And if you don't have a fireproof, let's say safe or flood and fireproof safe, have extra copies and give those to a trusted individual so they have copies of that. Where do you bank? Do you have a financial planner that helps you with your finances? Please make sure you have that, your financial institutions or banks that you deal with. With my uncle living in Maui, there's really only a handful of banks. And I remember he used to send us birthday checks. And I remember he was at the Bank of Hawaii. So that was pretty easy for me. I was able to contact the bank and say, okay, I'm power of attorney. I'm trustee now. I can send you all my documentation. I had to overnight my photo ID to verify who I was. I had to go through all of that in order for me to access his bank account. I didn't know if he had multiple accounts. Nothing was written down. Fortunately, the bank was very helpful after they, learned who I was and that I had the power of attorney to get in and handle his finances. And that's when I started really digging. I didn't know if he had a financial advisor. I had no idea if he had an IRA, HSA, 401k. Didn't know. I didn't even know he had a pension. So I'll get to that. I did know he owned a condo. And I remember him saying that he was married for a very short period of time. And he and his wife went to another island to buy land, 2 plots of land to retire to. Really, who lives in Maui and has to retire to another island to purchase land? Crazy, but they did. So I thought, okay, I wonder if that land still exists. It's in his name. I don't know. Again, no paperwork, no information. Your insurance, especially your life insurance policies. Where are those policies? Who's the contact information at those insurance companies? If you still have a car, you're driving, auto insurance, do you have a long-term care policy? That's very important that multiple people are very much aware that you have a long-term care policy. And I would suggest that you make sure that when your renewal notices are sent, not only those notices go to you, as well as a loved one, most likely your financial power of attorney. Like in the case of my mom, when her long-term care insurance renews, I get a notice, my brother gets a notice, she gets a notice. That way we make sure it doesn't lapse. So that's another biggie. Your auto title, if you own a car, you need to have that title available so someone can sell your car if need be. Any loan information, records on that. Of course, the obvious credit card. If you have any digital accounts like Venmo, PayPal, what are those accounts? What are the account numbers and passcodes, username and passcode? And I'll talk a little bit about the username and passcode and how to handle that. Do you have funeral plans? All I knew with my uncle, because it was in a casual conversation, he just said, I want to be cremated. Either I want to have my ashes, thrown over the ocean, or be buried in Jefferson Barracks, because he was a veteran, be buried in Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis, where my father was buried, and I know my mom will be buried. That's all I knew. And that was just a casual conversation. So I was able to carry out those wishes for him. Let's get to the pension. When I was digging through the last 4 years of my uncle's checking account, and that's all I had to go on, I learned where his income was coming from, and it was basically Social Security. I saw that he was getting a pension check and wondered why wasn't he getting that check anymore? So I thought, and he wasn't getting any, there was nothing deposited in his checking account for like investment. If he had any investments and he was getting dividend checks, I didn't see any of that. But on the pension, I was able to do further digging. It took me a considerable amount of time, but I was able to find out the pension where he worked in California. There was a pension. I was able to call the fund manager, and sure enough, he had 14 months of checks that he was not receiving because he failed to sign an annual letter they send out. Because they're not going to the pension company is not going to send a pension check to somebody who is no longer alive. So they assumed he was deceased and quit sending the checks. Fortunately, I was able to get the back pay because he was owed that money and they did send it. Thank God, because he did need that money for his care. So again, where's your income coming from? Who are those sources? Where are all your expenses and all of the companies you deal with? Going through, well, tax records is another. Who prepares your taxes? That's another source of information for someone that's having to deal with your end of life care or after death. Do you have a home alarm, a car alarm? What are the passcodes to that? Utilities subscriptions. It'd have been really nice if I would have had that list. Again, I'm in St. Louis. Uncle was in Hawaii. I don't know who he's paying utilities to. Thing is, he owns a condo. Again, my uncle's not a wealthy man. He owned a condo He moved himself into an independent living community. My mom and I had no idea he did this. Moved himself into an independent living community. They were not able to take care of him. He was beyond that level and he couldn't afford it. Hence why we got a call from a social worker. The community said, complained to the state, trying to get him basically kicked out of there or pay his bills. They were having a home health come in or private duty come in, racking up huge bills to take care of him. However, I don't think they were doing a great job, unfortunately, because, or at least for the amount of money they were charging, because he was incontinent. The urine smell was awful. The residents and staff were complaining about it. He had dementia, really couldn't take care of himself, even though he was very much a clean freak when he did not have dementia. He was also not going to the dining room to eat meals. And at night, if he was leaving his room, he had sundowners, so he was agitated. So again, he was not in the right place. And he needed to be in have different housing, different care, different level of that. But while he was in the independent living community for, I think it was around a year or so, he was paying at times his electric, gas, water bills for his condominium, and he wasn't living there. So what a waste. I was able to get the necessary things shut off, like cable, but I had to keep water and electricity going because I had to get his condo ready to sell. So who are your utility companies? Who gets paid? What can be shut off when you're no longer using those things, those services? If you have a computer, a laptop, or a phone, if there's passcodes to access your computer or your phone, please have that available for someone. I did not have that for my uncle, and so I had to have someone. And unfortunately, with my uncle, I did have a friend of a friend that was trustworthy, that I paid him using my uncle's money to be my boots on the ground. And I had him go into my uncle's condo, take the chip out and destroy it, because I was afraid if somebody got a hold of my uncle's computer, they could get passcodes or get information that, to wipe out his banking account. So we had that destroyed. But if he had had a user name, we could have typed in and wiped things out. But again, the computer was old, so it didn't really matter. Passcodes, username, passcodes are very important. If you're in any social media accounts, same thing. Where are those username and passcode? Does anybody owe you money? Do you have loans out there where people owe you money? Because even if you're no longer able to care for your finances, that money is still owed to you. Even after you die, that money is still owed to you. So your power of attorney, your financial power of attorney will want to pursue if anyone owes you money unless that debt is forgiven. Write down all of your doctors. And I'll talk about the HIPAA form, but if you have a HIPAA form signed naming certain people that can discuss your medical care with the physicians, then your medication list would be able to be provided. I was able to finally get that from my uncle, but it took a long time. And hence because of that, he was not able to get the right medications. And I found out that several prescriptions were being dosed twice. It was just a mess. So fortunately, I was able to get the HIPAA form signed. That took a while, and then get him on the proper medications and then be able to talk to his medical staff or his doctor. But I want to go back to what I skipped over intentionally is safe deposit box. Anybody have a safe deposit box? It's a good thing, and then it's not. They're at the safe deposit box or at a bank. If you have one, please make sure that at least two people know where your key is hidden and or the code to get in. In my uncle's case, I found out through the bank that he paid an annual fee to have a safe deposit box. For him being single, I thought, okay, that was probably a good idea. He could store things in there and not worry about maybe his condo getting broken into and things of value being stolen. Well, we couldn't find the key and had no passcodes, no information. The bank said, I'm sorry, even if you're trustee and power of attorney, we can't open that for you. The only or we can open it for you, but we'd have to have a locksmith come in and bore a hole through there. I thought, you know what? I'm managing so far with what I have. He is being taken care of. He's toward end of life. By that time, he was on hospice care. And I said, we'll just wait. After he dies, if there's money left over, I'll use that to have a locksmith come into the bank and get into a safe deposit box. Because I'm thinking, knowing my uncle, either there's going to be $1 million worth of gold bars in there, or it'll be a bunch of junk. Who knows? So after his body was cremated and mailed to St. Louis, and we buried his ashes, had a little service there, I thought, okay, this is the last piece, the closure. It'll give me at least closure. So I asked my mom, can I use the $550 to get into the safe deposit box? Because at that point, we were very curious. Sure enough, locksmith came to the bank. This was all on camera. I was witnessing this. They bored a hole. They opened the safe deposit box, and there was pretty much nothing but junk in there. And maybe it was important to him, but it was of no financial value. However, that was closure for me. So do your family a favor and make sure that if you have a safe deposit box or even a safe in your home, that they know they have access to get into those, to get that information when needed. So that's your big checklist. These things could take 6 months to get done or one weekend to compile this information, make the copies, and communicate where things are. On the passcodes, I recommend that if you are writing them down, and let's say you're using a passcode, you're using your sister's name, for example, or your nephew's name as, Bob and his birth date. Well, Bob will know if you start out the passcode of BOB and then his birth date, like 08/14/1952, for example, put X's in somewhere of those numbers, because if I saw that, I wouldn't know what Bob, whatever those digits are with a few X's, but Bob would know, or another family member might know how to decipher. So you don't want all your passwords just on a piece of paper that anybody could get to, or just make sure it's kept in a very, very secure spot. So that's my advice on the passcodes. There's also several services out there that you can use to store your passcodes digitally. But again, somebody would have to know how to get into that account in order to retrieve those passcodes. So communicate all this, write it down. The next group will take some time, and it does take some real thought, and it will cost some money to get a trust or a will. I highly recommend that if you need a trust or you feel like you need a trust, to talk to a trust attorney. They're usually called elder law attorney, and they work in preparing trusts, wills, and other documentation for your estate. They're also called estate planning attorneys. So elder law or estate planning attorneys. I would recommend going to somebody that specializes in that. The analogy is, I don't think you'd want to have heart surgery done by a podiatrist. The podiatrist could be best at working on feet and toes. Probably not the best person you choose to have heart surgery. And that's how I look at with attorneys. There's so many specializations, but please consult an elder law attorney to have a trust or even your will drafted. And they can tell you, do you need it? Do you not need it? What does it look like? There's no cookie cutter situation. An attorney can also help you draft, and I highly recommend you do this, a healthcare power of attorney that spells out your end of life healthcare wishes and how you want to live or die, and the treatment that you want or don't want. That's all spelled out. And you name a healthcare power of attorney and a successor on that document. Same way with your financial power of attorney or property power of attorney. Both of those documents or there is a document on the state of Missouri website. You can download it. You can print out the form. You can complete it on your own. It does need to be notarized, but I advise you, if you're unsure about the questions and you really don't have an expert to guide you through that, please talk to an attorney so that you're answering the questions the way you want them to be answered or interpreted. So again, your financial or property, your healthcare and financial power of attorney, those forms can be found on any state website, and they do need to be notarized when you sign those forms, or you can have your attorney that's helping you with your trust or your will, help you prepare and get those completed. The HIPAA, that's a healthcare portability. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. Make sure that your HIPAA form lists multiple individuals that can talk to the healthcare providers about your care, especially if your healthcare power of attorney may not be available, but other family members or friends can talk to the physicians about your care, about what to do, what's going on. But then your healthcare power of attorney would be the one to make final decisions if you're not able to. Again, all these things are put in place for when you're not able to physically or mentally or even emotionally state your wishes. And then on your healthcare power of attorney, your end of life wishes, including whether you want to be resuscitated or not, that's the DNR, is also on that form. So, and last, list any valuables, heirlooms, even if maybe they're not valuable, financially valuable, but they're important to you. List those and who, upon your death, should receive them. If they are valuable, I also recommend you list what those are. If you don't have additional insurance coverage on some of those items, valuable items, list those as well in case they're damaged, lost, or stolen. And that would be good for insurance purposes. So we've gotten through this big list. Again, be patient. It takes a while. And again, on the trust or will and your powers of attorney, those are critical documents. Had my uncle not had those in place, he would have become a ward of the state. Strangers would have been making all the decisions on his healthcare behalf and financial even. My mom and I would have had absolutely no say-so in any of that. And he would not have died or been taken care of, I know, the way he would have wanted to be taken care of. So highly recommend getting that done. And when you're doing all this, please consult with friends, family, and more importantly, professionals, because there's a lot of people out there say, oh, well, I heard this or I heard that. When it comes to your legal documents, please go with a trusted professional. It is worth every nickel you will spend. Feel free to get multiple opinions. If you meet with an attorney and you're just not feeling the relationship's driving or there's something there, meet with a second attorney. Again, elder law attorney. You can find elder law attorneys. There's a National Association of Elder Law Attorneys website you can look at. You can consult with individuals you trust as to other attorneys they might know about to get referrals. But get second, maybe even third opinion on any of these things, really. But in a nutshell, and when it's finally over, and you get through this, when you're completing this checklist, you're documenting, you're communicating with family members, it will give you a lot of clarity, as well as your family members or those involved that you've named to help with your care when you no longer can make those decisions. It gives them clarity, but it will give you peace of mind to know that when you're no longer able to make decisions for yourself, that your wishes will be carried out as you wanted them to. Fortunately for my uncle, from what I knew of him, I feel like I was able to jump in and carry out the wishes as I thought he would want them carried out. He was living in the proper environment, getting the proper health care. Fortunately, I was able to get in and manage his money to the point where he didn't run out of money until toward the end of life. He did have hospice care, which was a blessing because we could not be there at his end of life. And so I felt like things worked out okay for him. But I was working a full-time job. After work, my husband would fix dinner. I'd have dinner with the family, and I'd go back into my office probably 2 to 3 nights, at least 3 nights, at least 2 nights a week to talk to bank, realtors, all the people I need to talk to make sure that, things were getting done. And fortunately, in Hawaii, there was a 5 hour time difference. So I could work on these things in the evening. But let's say that wouldn't have happened if he would have been living like Central Time, like St. Louis. I would not have been able to take off work, or I might have had to quit my job to do this. And I would not probably have been in a financial position to do so. So again, my uncle's wishes he would not have been cared for the way he would have wanted to be cared for. And I don't think he realized when I said get a trust that, and I believe his attorney should have advised him, and maybe he did, and my uncle just didn't listen, but the attorney should have advised him to do this checklist. So I'd like for everybody to have a takeaway to work on this checklist, to work through these things. If you have any questions, or if you'd like for me to send you this checklist, I can do that. On Track Advisors, as Donna was saying at the very beginning, I am with On Track Advisors, and our services are we help individuals and families review and pay bills, do spend management and budgeting, organize tax and our state documents for tax purposes, monitor financial accounts. We do this for individuals who either don't want to do it, say there's busy professionals, and they just don't want to manage all the day-to-day stuff that goes on with paying bills and contacting insurance companies and making sure the dollar amount, the bill is correct, working with medical bills, all those kinds of things. They just don't want to mess with that. So we'll work with financial planners. We're not financial planners. We'll work with a financial planner. We'll work with a CPA. We'll work with attorneys, other professionals. There's full transparency in what we do. If we're working with an adult child on behalf of their parent, that adult child has full transparency into everything we do. We're just doing all the day-to-day minutia, so to speak, for that family. We are a member of the American Association of Daily Money Managers, fully insured, background checked. So you can have peace of mind on that. But the reason we got into this is, again, because of what I did for my uncle. Had I known what a care manager was for healthcare and a daily money manager is, I probably could have had for myself a whole lot of time back over that 6 to 8 month period that I was working on basically taking care of him from thousands of miles away. If you'd like to get that list, that big checklist, please contact me at 314-384-4002 on the screen, or reach out to us. You can get a hold of us through the ontrackadvisors.com, and there's a contact us button. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope everyone starts working on that big checklist, talk about it with your family, and get going. You will have peace of mind, believe me, when it's all done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn.
You're welcome.
I would like to honestly say this was such a plethora of great information. It was so great, so great.
Thank you.
And I'm sitting here like, do I have that together? I need to do this. I need to do that. Like, wow, Lynn, thanks a lot for
Yeah.
reminding me. And, at first I'm thinking like you're beating me up, but no, you're helping me.
Well, Donna, thank you for saying that, because I don't know that I mentioned, but this could be at any age.
Yeah.
People, it's not just toward end of life or when you're aging to put these things in
Yes.
place. In fact, my children at the age of 18 signed their healthcare and financial power of attorney.
Oh,
And
really?
they have, my daughter who lives out of town has a safe in her apartment, and she has documents and documentation in that safe, so that if
Wow.
something happens to her, we'll have to go to Dallas because she's single. There's no one there to help out, but we can access that information and start doing what we need to do to provide whatever care that might be needed.
Wow. Isn't that
Yeah.
awesome? That is so
Mhm.
good that that you taught them at such an early age. Because as we know, young people sometimes,
Mhm.
die either prematurely or just at an earlier age than we expect. And I mean,
Yeah.
and if you notice in the news, it's happening even more nowadays than it probably was 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like all the time. If they're
Mhm.
not dying, they're
Or
becoming
incapacitated.
disabled or something, where they
Yeah,
need somebody to care for them and look after them. And
absolutely.
I mean, gosh, I mean, you just
Yep.
this weekend is probably going to be a different weekend for my family.
Well, look at it, like I said, starting out, do you love them? And if you do,
Yes.
you don't want to make extra stress and anxiety on people that you love.
Yep.
And so you're giving them a gift.
That's it, absolutely. And it will, I'm telling you, I know it will eliminate so much extra added stress that the families go through when they are losing or have lost a loved one. Because if you haven't experienced it personally, I know I have, and I always around people that have experience where nothing is in place because somebody
Right.
just suddenly passes away,
Mhm.
and here it is, you're trying to, during your grieving process, you can't even
Right.
grieve properly because you're trying to scuffle
Yeah.
up dollars or find out if money is here or money is there and all
Yeah.
those sorts of things. um just thinking back on a friend of mine who passed a few years ago. She had a policy, a life insurance policy
Okay.
that she had, I guess from when her previous marriage, okay?
Okay.
She had never updated it. And she had been
Mm.
divorced, I think, like 20, 30 years. And her sister, it was just her sister, and a brother. And her sister, which was younger than her, the one that does everything, was doing everything for her. They were really close.
Yeah.
The husband, somewhere out of state, I think he was in California somewhere, and I think she left him like a $500,000.
Wow.
And the sister couldn't, it was nothing at all she could do because her sister forgot to update the information.
Well, and that good point on that, Donna. When you are meeting with an attorney to
Mm-hmm.
do a will or a trust, and a lot of people say, oh, I can just download that will form on Google. Yeah, you can. You're right. You can create your own will. However, if you're meeting with an attorney, they will ask you questions to prompt you to say thing or to think about things like, if you have life insurance through your employer, or if you got a life insurance policy years ago, or if you did your funeral planning with your first husband, not your second husband, those types of
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
Lawyers will ask those kinds of questions to prompt you to say, oh, yeah. So, in the case that you're talking about, the example, nobody prompted her to change the beneficiary
No,
on that
so
account.
she just
Yeah.
forgot
Mhm.
about it, or maybe thought about it several times, but just made it last on the list. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was very sad. So oh my goodness, Lynn. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you again. I'm so glad that you have
Well,
came on here to help us, to help educate us and our clients that we have. Again, I'm so glad you left your information. So if anybody
thank
has
you.
any questions, or even, if you need to call Aging Advantage for,
Yeah.
to update again, if you lose the information in the future, please, by all
Uh-huh.
means. And also to add to that, Aging Advantage, we actually work very close with elder law company that
Mhm.
you talked about. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
So at that same time, reach out to us. We can point you in the right direction. That's why we have these classes and educational, so that we can
Mhm.
promote different avenues and aspects that people may need to grab hold to. You may not need it today, but you may need it 3 4 months down the line,
That's
and
right.
get in
Yeah.
contact with us if you don't remember, so that we can point you in the right direction. So
Mhm.
this must definitely, I'm sure many, many, many people can use this information, and hopefully, you guys, everybody, we walk away with something that we've learned today. I know I did.
Great. Well,
The
good.
checklist itself.
Yeah, don't let it
I'm on it
overwhelm you. Don't let it scare you. It's like everything else, just how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
at a time. That's good to know
Mhm.
too. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Again,
You're
Lynn
welcome.
Potts with On Track Advisors. Thank you again, Lynn, for coming to be with us. You have a great
Great.
weekend.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Thank
opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're most definitely welcome. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Bye-bye.